When a routine traffic stop spirals into a career-defining moment, a police officer's worst assumptions collide with a truth he never saw coming. His target? The very man who holds his future in his hands. The Sacramento skyline burned with hues of gold and amber as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the bustling streets. Eric Porter exhaled slowly, eager to leave the weight of the day behind as he navigated his sleek sedan through the evening traffic. The air conditioning hummed in quiet rhythm, cooling the cabin as the faint melody of a jazz station played through the speakers. The world outside rushed past, a blur of neon signs and moving silhouettes. But inside his car, Eric allowed himself a brief moment of tranquility. That peace shattered the moment the flash of red and blue lights filled his rear-view mirror. A piercing siren followed, slicing through the evening air. Eric's grip on the steering wheel tightened momentarily before he eased onto the shoulder, rolling down his window as a patrol car pulled in behind him. Out stepped Officer Bradley Larson, mid-30s, a buzz cut, and a stance that radiated authority. The gleam of his badge caught the fading sunlight as he adjusted his belt, moving toward Eric's car with the measured confidence of a man who expected compliance. "License and registration," Larson demanded, his voice clipped, carrying an unmistakable edge of authority. Eric complied without hesitation, his movements calm and deliberate. He retrieved his documents from the glove compartment and handed them over, his expression unreadable as Larson studied his credentials with sharp, scrutinizing eyes. The silence stretched between them before the officer finally spoke again. "You know why I pulled you over?" Eric met his gaze through the side mirror. "Not entirely sure, officer." "You didn't come to a full stop at that light," Larson stated, though there was a flicker of hesitation in his voice. Eric frowned slightly, but nodded. "I see. I thought I slowed down in time, but I understand." Larson lingered, his gaze hardening as if expecting a different reaction. Something shifted in his posture, a subtle change, but noticeable. What should have been a routine stop had morphed into something else, something more personal. "You're not from around here, are you?" The question was casual on the surface, but there was an undertone that Eric recognized all too well. "Moved here a few months ago," Eric replied, keeping his voice even. "The address on my license is current." Larson didn't acknowledge the answer, his focus narrowing on something beyond the traffic violation. The shift in his demeanor was palpable. Suspicion now tinged his every word. "Where were you headed in such a hurry?" "Just going home." Eric saw it then, that unspoken moment of decision. Larson no longer viewed him as just another motorist. He was searching, probing for something deeper, something he could latch onto. "Step out of the car for me," Larson ordered, tucking Eric's documents into his chest pocket with a slowness that felt deliberate. Eric's fingers curled slightly against the steering wheel, a flicker of tension that he quickly masked. "Is there a specific reason for that, officer?" Larson's lips twitched, barely concealing his irritation. "I asked you to step out of the car. You don't want to make this harder than it has to be." The unspoken threat hung in the air. Eric inhaled deeply, then exhaled just as slowly before pushing open the door and stepping out. He was taller than Larson, his build lean but solid. His tailored suit hinted at professionalism, his polished shoes a reflection of meticulous care. Yet none of that seemed to matter. "Hands where I can see them." Larson gestured toward the hood of the car. Eric complied, his movements unhurried. "Is there something specific you're looking for?" Larson smirked faintly. "Just routine. We've had some incidents in the area. Can never be too careful." Eric turned his head slightly, meeting Larson's gaze. "Incidents involving men in business suits driving sedans? Or does this have more to do with something else?" The question landed like a punch. Larson's jaw tightened, his composure slipping for the briefest second before he recovered. His hand drifted instinctively toward his belt. "Watch your tone." "I'm simply asking a question," Eric replied smoothly. His voice held no defiance, only quiet firmness, and that seemed to unnerve Larson more than any act of resistance would have. The officer took a small step closer. "You seem awfully familiar with how this works. You got something to hide." Eric let the silence stretch before answering. "No, officer. I just believe in being clear about the reasons for an interaction like this." Transparency, you know? Larson scoffed, but didn't reply immediately. He was pacing now, circling, as if trying to regain control of a situation that was slipping through his fingers. The more Eric remained composed, the more unsettled Larson became. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. "Turn around and place your hands on the hood," Larson ordered. His voice clipped. "I need to check for weapons." Eric raised an eyebrow. "Weapons? Do I look like someone carrying a weapon?" "I'm not going to ask you again." Eric hesitated, a flicker of something unreadable passing across his face, before turning and placing his palms flat against the hood. Larson's boots crunched against the asphalt as he stepped forward, his hands moving over Eric in quick, rough motions. It was more than a search. It was an assertion of power. But Eric remained still, unflinching. "You're clean," Larson muttered, stepping back, almost disappointed. Eric straightened, smoothing out his suit. "Of course I am. Now, officer, if you're done—" "I'm not done," Larson interrupted, his voice rising slightly, betraying the frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "You seem to know a lot about what I can and can't do. Care to explain why?" Eric folded his arms, his posture relaxed despite the tension crackling between them. "I've had my fair share of interactions with law enforcement. Let's just say I've learned a lot over the years." Larson narrowed his eyes. "That so? You a lawyer or something?" Eric smiled faintly. "Or something." The ambiguity in his response only seemed to irritate Larson further. The officer stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Listen, you think you're smarter than me? Think you can talk your way out of this?" Eric met his gaze evenly. "I don't think anything, officer. I just believe in fairness. And so far, I'm not seeing much of it here." The words hung in the air, and for the first time, Larson hesitated. Then, Eric reached into his pocket slowly. "I'm reaching for my badge," he said, watching Larson's hand twitch toward his holster. A second later, Eric flipped open a leather wallet, revealing a gleaming badge. "Eric Porter," he said evenly, "head of Internal Affairs, Sacramento Division." Larson's face drained to color. His lips parted, but no words came. "Now, officer," Eric said, his tone cool, "would you like to continue this conversation?"